What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going over the two-handed Stamina Warden build. So with the two-handed build, the Stamina Warden here actually loses out on one of its signature abilities, Subterranean Assault. Now you don't necessarily have to completely lose the ability, but if you're looking to maximize your overall DPS, you're actually better off not running that ability at all. You're better off just running Wrecking Blow, just straight up spamming Wrecking Blow instead. This does give you a little bit of advantage because this does allow you to have one additional ability slot, another flex spot on the front bar, but for those of you guys who kind of want to maintain any sort of class identity, well, you don't really have any with the then two-handed build, unless you count the bear as your main source of Stamina Warden identity. So that's kind of where things stand with the Stamina Warden. It's pretty much all weapon abilities, all generic abilities, except for your ultimate and the Bull Netch. Of course, you do have 3 flex spots, and of course you can always add in Subterranean Assault, and I'll show you a parse where I use Subterranean Assault, so you guys can get an idea of how much of a DPS loss it actually is. But to maximize DPS, you're actually just going to end up just straight up spamming Wrecking Blow the whole time. This also does have implications for overall sustain. You will need to most likely do a few heavy attacks to sustain a full light attack rotation, compared to just running Subterranean Assault here. So that's something you also want to keep in mind here. So I'm going to show you guys basically two different parses. I should say two different parses. I'll do the rotation without Subterranean Assault, but I will show you a parse where I did use Subterranean Assault, so you guys can kind of see the DPS difference there. So with the rest of our build videos, no gear in this video. This is reserved for the two-handed gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right hand corner right around now. So if you want to know what gear I'm running, you can go ahead and pause this video, check out that video up there, and then come back here. We'll be going over the skills and the rotation, as well as provide a 21 million dummy parse for kind of build comparison purposes. So let's go ahead and get started here with the two-handed front bar here. We have Wrecking Blow, Executioner, and then we have 3 flex spots. So I have a couple of abilities here that you can kind of swap out as you see fit here. So I have 2 fighter skilled abilities, Ring of Preservation for the Minor Protection and the Self-Heal. Really great for instances where you're all stacked together. You might want a little bit of a heal, you might want a little bit of additional mitigation. Always nice to have that option there. Barbed Trap for the Minor Force, and then here I have Bird of Prey, but you can always swap it out with any other fighter skill ability. The advantage of running Bird of Prey is that you do not have to rely on your healer any longer for good Minor Berserk uptime while you're on your front bar at the very least, because we actually won't be double barring Bird of Prey here. You do get a little bit of a damage bonus here, so you get 2% additional damage done. Mathematically speaking, putting a fighter skilled ability instead here on this slot will actually end up giving you a little bit more DPS, just a hair. But the Bird of Prey utility of basically not having to worry about Minor Berserk while on your front bar is also a pretty strong, compelling reason to run Bird of Prey rather than a fighter skilled ability. Then we have our ultimate, Wild Guardian, and then the back bar, pretty much exactly the same compared to a dual wield build. So we have Soul Trap, Poison Injection, Arrow Barrage, Bull Netch, Barbed Trap again, and Wild Guardian. You can see here that we do have 3 flex spots to kind of swap things out as needed. The absolute best DPS would come from just stacking up 3 fighter skilled abilities, but again, like I mentioned, the utility of running Bird of Prey can't be understated here. If you want to run Subterranean Assault, like I mentioned earlier, you would just replace one of these abilities with Subterranean Assault, and there you have it. So instead of having 3 flex spots, you would only have 2 flex spots instead. Now, in terms of other abilities you might want to consider using in place of these flex spots here, Cutting Dive, if you are able to kind of time the off balance here, you can actually get quite a bit of DPS from the bleed that you're able to stack. That being said, though, it does require quite a bit of micromanagement to know when the enemy is going to be off balance, and then you basically just need to spam Cutting Dive while the enemy is off balance, which you might not be able to do depending on how the fight mechanics are working out. But it is potentially useful because you can stack that bleed up to 7 times, which ends up being quite a strong bleed overall. But again, it does require quite a bit of micromanagement in order to really make the most out of Cutting Dive. You can also run Growing Swarm for minor vulnerability. really useful if you don't have any other source of minor vulnerability. For example, you might not have a magical warden or a warden healer that's able to run fetch or infection. It's not a particularly strong dot. It does give you a little bit of AoE potential here. Not a very strong AoE, but still some AoE nonetheless. The main reason you would be running Growing Swarm would be for the minor vulnerability that it provides when you cast it. Moving on from there, under the two-handed line, I do want to point out using Brawler or Kra'gh as a spammable in place of Wrecking Blow for trash fights. This does have a conal. It's a conal move, so you are able to hit multiple enemies with it. A lot of people prefer to run Brawler in trash because it provides a pretty nice damage shield. So 47-37 damage shield here, and it does increase depending on how many things you're able to hit. So when you have the full 300% additional damage shield, you actually have an 18k, a little bit over 18k damage shield, which basically more or less doubles your health because damage shields do inherit overall resistances. Kra'gh, while it does have a bleed behind it, the bleed itself is not particularly strong, and you'd really be running this ability as a spammable anyways for AoE purposes, so you're better off just running Brawler for the additional swappability. Even though technically Kra'gh is a little bit more damage just because of the additional bleed damage that you get out of it. Moving on from there, I do want to point out evasion for Elude Shuffle for the major evasion, which basically decreases the damage you take from AoE attacks. A lot of damage that you actually take in dungeons and trials do fall under the AoE umbrella, so you do get the mitigation from major evasion that way. Beyond that, for Soul Trap, you notice I don't have the morphed version of Soul Trap here. That's because you can pick either morph of Soul Trap. You can go Consuming if you want to maintain a single target damage and get a little bit of sustain, or you can go with Soul Splitting if you want to go just straight for cleave damage instead. So pick whichever morph you prefer. The Fighter's Guild line, all these abilities do have a use. So for example, Silver Leash is useful if you want to help your tank chain things in. Something you got to work out with the tank, of course. Don't necessarily want to do this in a pug. You might end up pissing off your tank, so just be mindful of when and where you want to use Silver Leash. Ring of Preservation we already talked about with the minor protection and the heal. Useful in certain fights where you're kind of stacked together and you want additional mitigation and healing. Then Camouflage Hunter for the minor berserk when you deal crit damage on an enemy's flank. Potentially useful. Depending on a specific fight, you might be behind the boss, or you might be to the side of the boss, and you'll be able to maintain that minor berserk uptime. So that way you don't have to really rely on your healer for minor berserk. So in those fights, you can actually use Camouflage Hunter in place of Bird of Prey in order to basically give yourself minor berserk and rely a little bit less on your healer for that buff instead. So Camouflage Hunter kind of fits that nice sort of medium between Bird of Prey and maximizing overall damage. If you want a self-heal, I would recommend running Echoing Vigor instead of Resolving Vigor if you have multiple stamina DPS in the group. And that's because multiple Echoing Vigors will stack with each other. So if you have 3 Echoing Vigors, you get 3 Echoing Vigor healing ticks going. Obviously spaced out, staggered, depending on when each person hits their Echoing Vigor. So the actual healing done per second with multiple vigors actually ends up being stronger than if every stamina DPS just ran Resolving Vigor instead. Even if you're the only stamina DPS in group, there is an argument to be made for running Echoing Vigor because it does provide healing for the rest of the group as well. But that's pretty much everything in terms of skills. Now for the rotation. Again, we'll be just taking a look at using Wrecking Blow as your main spammable, and then I'll show you a parse where I use Subterranean Assault here. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of context here, when we do our parse, Stamdens are probably the lowest DPS, stamina DPS right now, so don't expect any really big parses here. The DPS difference between dual wield and two-handed still exists. Two-handed still pulls a little bit less single target DPS, so don't expect any sort of like 82, 83k parses here. But the rotation itself, very simple, very straightforward if you're not running Subterranean Assault. It's basically just do all your backbar dots and just use Wrecking Blow the whole time up until you get to around 30% or so. That's when you want to start running Executioner instead. You can see here it's just straight up Wrecking Blow spam. And then you go back to your backbar, renew all your dots. You start to run out. And then just go straight back to Wrecking Blow spam. You just use Trap whenever it runs out. Use Netch every other time you're on your back bar, and then you just keep going. Just keep on Wrecking Blowing. They can sell here. Very simple, very straightforward. Essentially static. The only sort of dynamic part is when you put down your trap. But very straightforward. And then once again, when you hit around 30% health remaining, you swap from Wrecking Blow spam to Executioner spam instead. For your Bull Netch, you can do it basically every other rotation to maintain 100% uptime on it. You can do every third time around your back bar instead if you don't mind a little bit of downtime on the Bull Netch. So it's kind of up to you where you want to do it. When I'm doing the parse though, you will see me do it every other time on my back bar. So every second Arrow Barrage cast, you'll see me use Bull Netch. Now if you're running Subterranean Assault, that rotation becomes a little bit more complex. Something's weird with my Barrage, but not a big deal. But with Subterranean Assault, it gets a little bit more complex because now you have to include Subterranean Assault in your rotation. If you guys remember from the dual wield video, very similar concept here. It's Subterranean Assault, 2 abilities, Subterranean Assault, 2 abilities, so you will need to break up your back bar rotation. So it's a little bit more complex. Not necessarily dynamic per se, but it is still more complex than your rotation without Subterranean Assault. So if you are running Subterranean Assault, two abilities, Subterranean Assault, 2 abilities, Subterranean Assault, and then you do 2 abilities on your back bar here, 2 abilities on your back bar again, and that's basically it for Subterranean Assault rotation. Basically, you just use 2 abilities between each Subterranean Assault here, and you just renew Trap and Bull Netch when they run out. You also use your ultimate, obviously. But that's the main difference there between Wrecking Blow and Subterranean Assault. So the Subterranean Assault rotation, a little bit more dynamic because you have to pay attention to both the Bull Netch and the rearming trap, Barbed trap durations, as well as your ultimate. But it's still fairly straightforward. It's still just Subterranean Assault, 2 abilities, Subterranean Assault, 2 abilities. Let's reset the dummy here so we can get out of combat. And we'll do a 21 million dummy parse. So you guys can use this parse to compare it to other stamina DPS videos that I have on this channel. Don't necessarily take this parse and compare it to other people's parses because those people are not me. To maintain validity of this parse, you will want to compare it to just parses that I have done personally on this channel. But I will swap my abilities around here because I did say I would not be using Subterranean Assault parse here. And that there. And we will maintain Bird of Prey here, although Camouflage Hunter might be the better option if you're able to basically stay at the enemy's flank. So let's go ahead and get started here. We'll try to narrate throughout the parse as I see fit. So here with the Wrecking Blow, you just have to maintain your Barbed Trap, whose duration don't really line up very well with everything else. It's going to be roughly every other time you're on your front bar, you're going to be recasting Barbed Trap here. If you do have a double Bard like I do, oh, I forgot to hit, and you can, as I was saying, if you do have Trap Double Barge, you can hit it while you're on your back bar or front bar. Doesn't really matter which one you hit with on, because it will dynamically update based on the bar that you happen to be on when the damage ticks. Choose your ultimate whenever it comes up. Ideally you want to do it on the front bar because you have a little bit higher weapon damage on the front bar usually. I am running Lokkestiiz on my front bar, so that's why I'm careful to use synergies on my front bar only here. You can see that the rotation is pretty simple, straightforward. I'm just going to put down trap before I swap my back bar here. Here that the Stamina Warden's slightly lower sustain compared to some other classes is starting to show here. You will probably see me do a heavy attack at some point to get some resources back. If you do need a heavy attack, you can really introduce them wherever you'd like in your rotation, wherever you feel it's most comfortable. I will not forget to cast Full Netch every other time here. Casting Bull Netch every other rotation compared to every 3 rotations will also help out your overall sustain because it doesn't cost any stamina for you to use it. We'll be swapping over to Executioner probably at the end of our next backbar rotation. We're hitting about 30% health now. Swap over to Executioner now. Sustain's a little bit easier with Executioner, but you're still going to, generally speaking, be losing resources compared to gaining them. Might be able to make it through without needing to heavy attack at all. Yeah, we should be able to make it through without needing the heavy attack here. Got another shard in a few seconds here. I'll actually stop doing my backbar dots and just spam Executioner here as we get to the tail end of the parse. And there we have it. That is the two-handed parse here. So overall, not terrible, but it's also not great either compared to a dual wield build. 79.2k here. And again, this is without Subterranean Assault. The parse I did with Subterranean Assault was noticeably lower. This one was not quite as clean, but I got 76k. I can probably push up to about 77k or so with Subterranean Assault. The downside of running this is the fact that Subterranean Assault not particularly useful, and if you're using this as your spammable here, you're basically giving up a little bit of Wrecking Blow here, and Wrecking Blow is fairly strong, not quite as strong in terms of Subterranean Assault in terms of the actual hits. You can see the averages here. But Wrecking Blow does provide some additional empower, which does improve your overall light attack DPS. So if you go ahead and take a look at the Wrecking Blow averages here, not much higher here, but light attack DPS is significantly higher because we're getting a lot more empowers because we're getting more Wrecking Blows, and that is what I think is making the difference here between Subterranean Assault versus Wrecking Blow as your main spammable. But again, the Subterranean Assault parse that I had was probably on the lower end of things. You can probably hit around 77, I can probably hit around 77, maybe 77.5, 0.6k or something like that. It's not noticeable in terms of DPS loss, but to maximize your DPS, you will want to use Wrecking Blow rather than Subterranean Assault as your spammable. But that concludes this build video. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.